Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love these watches, everything today is for sale. We're waking up with watches. Prices in the description below when available. If not, contact me directly. I have pricing for all of these watches. We are also looking to trade and purchase. We buy, sell, and trade. We're looking to build inventory. If you have a watch or even an entire collection, we pay cash, we pay fast, no upper limit on value paid. To buy, trade, or sell, your email concierge straight to me is tmosso at thewatchbox.com. All right, let's jump straight into a classic watch that came out in 2008 based on a much older model. This is the 544501 IWC Vintage Portugueser. Now, it's based on the original 1939 Model 325, and it is gorgeous. 44.1 millimeters in diameter in stainless steel and only 10 millimeters thick. It's broad flat. It is sapphire capped, and my offending fingerprints notwithstanding, this example is in awesome condition. You can see the dial is black matte, graced with lovely applique indices and simple Art Deco style Arabic numerals. We have a railroad minute track outboard, leaf style hands, a lovely sector containing the hours and hour indices, small seconds, very true to the original watch. The original watch was designed to be a super accurate wristwatch that could run as accurately as a pocket watch. And the way to do that back then was to put a pocket watch movement in the wristwatch. The idea was prompted by the Portuguese importers of IWC, hence the name Portugueser for the resulting model. And it was so large because the original contained a pocket watch movement, and so too does this one. This is the properly sized IWC reference 98295, manual wind, 46-hour power reserve. It is over 36 millimeters in diameter. It's actually about 37, and you can see it has a very traditional layout. We have the crown wheel adjacent to the ratchet wheel, which sits on top of the barrel. You can see there's this lovely spring-loaded extensible click with a swan's neck click spring, much like a pocket watch. We have a three-quarter style bridge against pocket watch design language, a true center wheel architecture, so barrel, center wheel, third wheel, fourth wheel, escape wheel, and then the balance. And note the balance is almost the radius of the movement, as it would be huge and slow beating in a pocket watch. 18,000 vibrations per hour. This one features an overcoil hairspring made by hand, 5-position adjustment, and as you can see, there's a lovely black polished extended Jones arrow index. This is a micrometric regulator as invented by the American father of IWC, F.A. Jones. Now you have an enormous hacking lever. You can actually see it right underneath my finger there, and you can see it move into contact with the balance when I want to stop the balance. So an uncommon feature for a pocket watch style movement, we have that hacking seconds mechanism. All screw heads are black polished. We have Cote de Genève across the bridges, satination on the wheels. There's engine turning in 2 sizes on the base plate. You can see the index is black polished as well. The teeth of the ratchet and crown wheel have been black polished, and the watch has a little bit of beveling, as you can see on the edge of the bridges. A very fine three-hand watch, about as large as three-hand watches get. It's elegant and broad across my 16-centimeter circumference wrist, but it's a Portuguese, and big has always been the style with the Portuguese. There's a thing about these watches. They were born to wear large because larger back then meant more accurate. Today, especially on the case back, it means more beautiful, and it easily fits underneath the cuff. Now we have a special edition created in 2007 for the Malaysian Kuala Lumpur boutique for Audemars Piguet. This is a 100-piece titanium limited edition. You can see the watch all in titanium with full bracelet, a feature rarely seen on the offshores. On the reverse side, you can see the name of the street on which the boutique is located, Jalan Bukit Bintang, that is in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And this watch is a 100-piece limited series, a very special watch with a black lacquered mega tapisserie dial, 42 millimeters in titanium. Note the use of black bolts rather than the conventional polished steel framing the center dial, and of course lovely shocks of yellow for the chronograph center hands, the baton style hour and minute hands, as well as the Arabic numerals. It's even an inverse panda with silver white registers and a black dial base, tachymeter outboard. This F-series watch was one of the first to be powered by the in-house caliber 3126 with a 50 to 55 hour power reserve, and it's 100 meters water resistant. Quick fun fact about this model: Because of the specific lacquer that is used on the hands and numerals, it is not loomed, which sets it apart from most Royal Oak offshores. Being 100 meters water resistant isn't enough to make most offshores swimmable, as most of them come on a hornback alligator strap. This one recaptures the original integration of Gerald Genta's original Royal Oak, which was designed with a bracelet, and that titanium bracelet gives you the flexibility to wear the watch in the water without having to swap first. Now, let's say you love the idea, but you want something a bit more discreet, a bit thinner, more suitable for a small wrist. Well, we turn back the clock to 1997 and the original Royal Oak chronographs. Now, here, 39 millimeters in stainless steel. This is the 25860ST. The watch features a Grande Tapisserie dial, which is the large hobnail. Unlike the Mega, which is stamped, the Grande Tapisserie is cut on a pantograph. Now, it may be a little bit difficult to see right here, but this is a truly special watch with a wonderfully subtle texturing, as the pantograph creates not just the large hobnails, but also the texture that sits between them and runs over their surface. Now, this watch, of course, does feature luminescence, and plenty of it. It also features a screw-down crown, screw-down pushers, a swimmable, surface swimmable, 50-meter rating. You can see here that, as with the titanium bracelet before, the finishing you get on a Royal Oak or an offshore bracelet is by itself worth the price of admission. It takes between 9 and 11 hours to finish these bracelets. We also have white gold bolts inside the bezel. On the Royal Oaks, they are always made of gold. On the offshores, they are always made of steel. And you can see there's a little bit of a contrast between the warmth of the white gold bolts and the silver white of the stainless steel bezel. Now we're going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to throw this watch on my wrist. Inside is a Frédéric Piguet 1185 automatic movement, a high horology movement, also used on, for example, the Vacheron Constantin overseas chronograph of the time. Now, the watch is flat, flush, and compact again. This is a 39 millimeter watch of the type that would have been discontinued back in 2012 when the 41 millimeter chrono arrived. A lot of folks prefer this size, and certainly this is the size that the designer originally intended in 1972. The movement is hand-finished, 5-position adjusted, automatic winding with a 40-hour power reserve. It has both vertical clutch and column wheel, so this watch has pedigree inside and out. A lot of folks ask, Tim, why don't you show more affordable watches on Wake Up with Watches? Well, I do my best. Of course, we are an upscale watch vendor, and most of our watches do cost 5 figures. Happily, you can get a fine brand watch from a major manufacturer with a lot of thoughtful refinements for not a lot of money. Karl F. Bucherer is an ancient name associated with Bucherer of Lucerne, a company that dates back to the 1880s. They're best known as the largest watch retailer in terms of value sold in Europe, and their Zurich flagship store is supposed to be a $1 billion business by itself. Well, in 2001, they relaunched Karl F. Bucherer as a brand in its own right. And this is the Petravi Scuba Tech. It's part of their sports watch line. Launched in 2013, it is a smart alternative to something like an Oris or Longines diver. Taking a quick look here, you can see that the watch is big. At 44.6 millimeters, you might even think it's too big. But first of all, it's pretty thin, at just over 13.5 millimeters thick, and it feels incredibly robust. There are a few watches available at any price that feel more solid of case and bracelet and clasp than this one. Because it's broad and flat, it actually wears quite gracefully across the wrist. It's far thinner than a Sea Dweller, and yet it is impressively water resistant to 500 meters. It has a helium escape valve for saturation diving, and you can see just how flat it is. My wrist, 16 centimeters circumference, has no problem wearing it, and you could wear this watch on a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference. So we see impressive things going on here. In terms of construction, we have a ceramic bezel insert. We have a helium escape valve. We have 500 meter water resistance. We have applique indices on the dial. We have plenty of luminescence, as you can see quite easily here, an enormous pearl on the bezel. We have a bezel with a wonderfully precise and sharp 120-click action. We have a bracelet that's fixed to the case using screws and bars, and then you could see removable links in the bracelet are fixed in place using screws, no pin sleeves here. Take a quick look inside the clasp, and you can see there is a fold-out dive extension, and that's on one side. On the opposite side, you will find that there is a push-button incremental slider, so you get more total extension, but you also get the option of fine-tuning the fit here, and that's a wonderful way to be able to ensure you get exactly the right fit. Take a look internally. Impressive stuff. Ceramic pin snap balls. Those are used to ensure the tight tolerances are retained over time and cannot wear down. We have a double fold deploying clasp with twin trigger release made of exceptionally thick gauge stainless steel. And then we roll around to the reverse side, and you can see the manta ray, which is sort of the patron saint or symbol of this model. It's obvious and overt on the reverse side. It's a little bit more subtle, but you can see that there's a gloss manta ray motif that echoes across the dial repetitively. The watch has a chronometer certified Sellita SW200, so it is the highest grade of Sellita SW200 available, COSC certified, and very impressive. There's even double row knurling on the crown. A great watch at a great price. Here's something unique from a brand I rarely feature on the show, from Marin. This came out in 2019. It was a 10-piece limited edition. This is the London Chronograph in bronze. So you can see it has the typical Piccadilly case with its lugs fixed by screws and its straight lug profile. A little bit Breguet, yes, but this watch calls on the history of, first of all, British watchmaking, second, Swiss watchmaking, and third, Peter Marin's experience in particular. Marin, of course, started restoring watches near Piccadilly Square, and that is the namesake of this watch. So a lot's going on here. You have a 42mm bronze case that looks lovely, onion-style crown, pump-style pushers. The dial has wonderful depth to it. As you can see, the sub-registers sit on platforms elevated above the base. The base is a lovely satin metallic with a gradient fade from light at the center to dark at the edge. You can see the Marin logo is actually a black polished disc underneath the discs, and you can see that's what it looks like. That is the logo. That's what this polished surface is. Outboard, we have a scale against which we can read our minutes as well as our chronograph seconds and fractions of a second. We do have a little bit of luminescence, but what really makes this watch special is that this 10-piece limited edition uses a 1960s vintage Valjoux movement internally, and you can see it is beautifully wrought with a traditional lateral clutch column wheel architecture, nicely finished to modern tastes and standards. It's a manual wind with a beat rate of 18,000 vibrations per hour and a 40-hour power reserve. And the feel of the column wheel is absolutely world class. Zoom out a little bit, throw this watch on the wrist. What a wonderful alternative. You get the vintage watch vibe, but without the vintage watch pitfalls of condition and originality being suspect. The watch is unlike anything else being made in the industry today, as it's a combination of retro and resolutely almost headstrong modernism, especially in the bronze case, the color, and the three dimensions of the dial. A very cool 42mm watch that I think just about anyone could wear with great panache. It's a dress watch. It's also sporty. You would have absolutely no trouble wearing this watch with a bathing suit or a business suit. Just remember, 30 meters water resistant, so this one is not for swimming, but it would look downright cool sitting by, but not in, the pool. Okay, from IWC comes a sentimental favorite of mine. This is the Davinci Perpetual Calendar Chronograph, 39mm. It's the reference 3750, and this is the -01 model. It was an absolute supernova when it launched at Basel in 1985. It was IWC doubling down not just on mechanical watchmaking, but on complicated mechanical watchmaking. So the design was by Hanno Bucherer, who was an important designer for IWC during the period. The Perpetual Calendar system was by IWC watchmaker Kurt Klaus. So it's mechanically programmed, and you can adjust everything: the day, the date, the month, the year, the decade, even the moon phase. And take note, the dial is white lacquer, but the moon phase disc is actually aventurine glass. Now I can adjust everything just like this. Super simple. I am adjusting the perpetual calendar just as I would adjust the date on a date just. You can't make up an imaginary combination of date, month, year, decade, and moon. It is programmed until the year 2100, so you just set it and everything moves in its proper sync. Now, of course, it does feature the year, it does feature the decade. It's an automatic winder, and underneath the base caliber is a Valjoux 7750, but hugely beautifully elaborated. The watch uses Vendôme-style lugs that are double-hinged for excellent fit, and while most of these came from the factory with plexiglass crystals, a few were optionally fitted with sapphires, and this is one of those upgrade watches. It has a wonderful, authentic, albeit subtle, tritium fade patina dial. You can see signed Swiss T. It is tritium at each one of the indices, as well as tritium on the hands, and it's faded to a lush off-white that beautifully matches the gold of the hands and the indices themselves. So I'm going to throw this watch on my wrist. It has pre-1995 hallmarks, so it would have been made in the first decade of these Davinci Perpetual Calendar chronographs. This was a landmark watch for IWC as well as the Swiss watch industry because it announced, with no doubt and no hesitation, no two ways about it, IWC and Switzerland were back in the game in the world of complicated watchmaking. The future no longer belonged to quartz. The rudimentary, the perfunctory, the banal, the time-telling belonged to quartz, but the spectacular belonged to mechanical watches. All of the emotion of that era and the comeback from the quartz crisis is embodied in this design, which was incredibly audacious at the time, and today has a wonderfully endearing sort of dated character about it. I really enjoy it because it looks like it hails from the mid-'80s. Now here's a watch that looks like it hails from 1942, and for good reason. Back in late 2017, Vacheron launched a series of special historique collection watches drawn from the company's own history, and this of course is the historique 1942 triple calendar. It's a watch that features a spectacular 40mm stainless steel case with corne de vache style lugs, as well as these gadroons that wrap all the way around. It's like wearing the Chrysler Building or an Airstream trailer on your wrist. Now, being 40mm in steel, it's quite resistant to scratches and scuffs. Most Vacherons are precious metal. This one isn't, making it more usable day to day. It has a lovely champagne sunburst center dial with handsome Art Deco style numerals on the center dial. There's a red track outboard for the index style pointer date. We have the day, we have the month, and of course we have the date. We have simple fired blue steel baton hands because the 1942 original would have been very, very simple. Now this watch historically would have been powered by a modified LeCoultre movement. This one is powered by a Vacheron caliber, and you can see it's a beauty. Caliber 4401. My favorite detail here is if you look very carefully, you can see there's a sharp interior angle where the bridge meets the pivot of the escape wheel, and that's something you will see on many fine watches, but there are watches with the Geneva hallmark that do not have an interior angle. This one has two. You can see on top of the center wheel, and it is a very traditional pocket watch style layout with a center wheel architecture, beautifully finished with mirrored anglage, richly ridged Côte de Genève, satinated wheels, black polished screws with chamfered slots and chamfered circumference. You can see a lovely satination brushed onto the barrel as well as the train wheels, and you can see that the regulator cap and the stud holder are black polished on their top. So this is a very special watch. Manual wind, 65-hour power reserve, and take note, Geneva hallmark case as well as movement. Since 2012, the Poinçon de Genève is a standard for full watch assembly quality, not just movement finish. And it's a wonderful wearing watch, narrow across the wrist, suitable for men and for women. This is one of the cleverest watches you will encounter. Back in 2010, Zenith announced a new model called the El Primero Captain Windsor Annual Calendar. And the annual calendar system was designed by Ulysse Nardin, superstar and alumnus Ludwig Axelin. The same annual calendar system, which uses only 9 different parts on top of the El Primero, would later be incorporated into, among others, Ox und Junior watches. So you get an El Primero base, automatic winding, high beat, lateral clutch, column wheel, 50-hour power reserve. Flip it over, you get the Ludwig Axelin annual calendar. Now the watch features a system that allows you to quick set the calendar mechanism, and it is an annual calendar, meaning you only need to adjust it once annually during the jump from February to March. So it's not too late. You can still buy this watch in time for annual calendar day. Now, with the crisp column wheel actuation, there's quite a satisfaction to operating this pusher. It is quite sharp and well tuned, and that's a traditional virtue of the El Primero. So too is the 10 beat per second rate, which creates a smoother sweeping seconds hand for the chronograph. The watch in lush red gold is 42 millimeters in diameter, so while it looks large, it's large, not huge, and I easily wear it on my wrist again. My wrist is 16 centimeters circumference. There are no issues there. It's even thin enough to fit underneath the cuff, and it comes with a right substantial double deployant clasp built in. This is a very substantial and heavy clasp. There's a lot of red gold in there. Now, if you want a chronograph that's even more unusual and exclusive, allow me to present the Arnold & Son CTB, 44 millimeters in stainless steel. It wears smaller than that. As you can see on my wrist, it really is quite compact. The lugs are short from side to side, so while the case and the dial are large for legibility, the watch fits compact. Now, Arnold & Son of La Chaux-de-Fonds is an integrated high horology manufacturer powered by citizen watch money, but allowed to work in a Swiss idiom with a cost no object view to engineering and finishing their watches. They make about 700 watches a year, so we're talking about 200 fewer per year than FP Journe. Now, taking a quick look at the dial, you can see it is triple finished. There are 3 different finishes here. We have opaline, we have a deeply grained frosting, and then we have a brushed metallic, which is also used outboard for the seconds, sub-seconds, so fractions of seconds, and you can see that we have running seconds as well as chronograph seconds. Chronograph seconds are sweep seconds, 8 beats per second. Running seconds are deadbeat seconds, and you can see how perfectly aligned that hand is. Absolutely no error from index to index as it ticks. So you get this wonderful do-si-do two-step of the chronograph running at the same time the deadbeat second system, the 1 hertz system, is running. Now you can see we have a chronograph 60-minute register. Most chronographs only give you 30 minutes. 60 minutes to me has always been more practical. Now all of the hands are fired blue steel. Turn it all over, and you can see this movement, caliber 7103, does in fact include high horology finish, but a couple of different approaches. As you can see, nickel anthracite coating over everything, black polished columns on the column wheel for the chronograph. It is a vertical clutch chronograph, so it engages absolutely without any jump or stagger, and you can leave it running if you wish. There's no additional wear and tear because there's no free play in the vertical clutch. The watch has a 45 to 50 hour power reserve, and I mentioned different ways of finishing things. First, there's the nickel anthracite coating. Second, you can see that the bevels are 1 mile wide. Some of the fattest anglage I have ever seen this side of Philippe Dufour. They render it so broad and rounded that you don't need a loop to appreciate it. Another thing that they do a little bit differently is instead of linear or circular Côte de Genève, they use Côte de Soleil or sunburst that radiate out from a point underneath the winding rotor system. All screw heads are black polished and chamfered. This is a truly high horology watch at a very reasonable price, because new, these retail for almost $28,000, and you can get it for about 40% of that pre-owned. This is a great value from a wonderful manufacturer that is perhaps a little bit too underrated. I class them equally with companies like Parmigiani, for example. Great watches, but nobody's paying attention. You can be better than the Scrum. No value when you see it, not just when you see a price. This is value. Then again, some people do like hyped up brands, but I'm going to give you a version of a hyped up brand that we rarely see. Not just the Yachtmaster, which after all isn't a GMT, a Submariner, or a Daytona, but this is an unusual late Yachtmaster. So the watch you see right here is a wonderful combination of steel and gold. It's a 5-digit reference, and the dial is a lush and lovely metallic sunburst. You can see it's gray metallic, yellow gold indices, yellow gold hands, yellow gold bezel, bidirectional rotating, those fluid lug profiles that we associate with the Yachtmaster. It does not use a Submariner case. Its case is actually most similar to the Daytona in terms of how it's shaped. 100 meters water resistant. You get the Yachtsman's bezel. You get a chronometer certification, you get plenty of superluminova, and then you can see when I say this is a late 5-digit reference, it includes some transitional features. So we've got solid end links, but we've got hollow center links, and we've got one of the last stamped clasps available on a Rolex. But because the watch is a scrambled serial number and relatively new as these things go, the tolerances of the bracelet as well as the clasp remain as sharp and crisp as the day the watch left Geneva. So this is really a very special watch. It's thin, it's fine, it's 40 millimeters in diameter. Thank God it's not another Submariner. And it's got a lovely warmth to it with the two-tone. Always underrated in the modern era. Two-tone hasn't really been a thing since the 90s, but very slowly and oddly, because of the millennials and Generation Z, two-tone is making a comeback, and this watch might just be on the forefront of that trend, and you can really see just how flat and flush it is. It is much thinner than a GMT. It's even thinner than a Daytona by about 0.5 millimeter. Now, I talk about some brands as being underrated, and Girard Perregaux, Glasuta Original, Blancpain outside of the 50 Fathoms, Ulysse Nardin, Parmigiani, Arnold & Son, I'd love them all, and I wish you would too. Now, this is the Executive Blast Skeleton in Carbonium, and it is a fantastic watch. Open dial, single barrel, manual wind, 4-day power reserve. You can see Ulysse Nardin makes its own proprietary hairspring in anti-magnetic silicon. It has a free-sprung balance with gold masses for regulation, and you can see the entire balance is made of UN's own proprietary silicon. Now, the watch itself is open, airy, and light in carbonium with plenty of luminescence, and you can see it is individually numbered on its flank like a Marin chronometer with that machined forged carbon or carbonium construction. No two will be exactly alike because these are carbon fibers set inside resin. So no two will have that same fabric layup pattern on the dial. Now we have a lovely satination surrounding the center dial. We also have a wonderful combination of applique golden indices, polished dial side bolts, and a minute track that makes this watch actually quite easy to read. Turn it all over and you can see it's very simple. From the barrel all the way down to the escapement, the watch has a rubber strap, and as you can see, a simple no-nonsense pin buckle. We will throw this sporty watch on my wrist. It's 43 millimeters, but it doesn't wear that way. Being relatively thin and super light, it feels more like a 40 millimeter steel watch, and the strap is one of the finest I've encountered, being super pliant and flexible. This is a watch suitable for a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. Despite being at face value quite large, it's very light, wieldy, and comfortable. All right, now we're getting into the major leagues. Debatoon is a company that has made fewer than 3,000 watches since it was established in 2002. It is one of the fastest rising independents in the world in terms of status and stature. It is my personal favorite brand and has been for 7 years. And they make wonderful watches that are admittedly a bit too avant-garde for some. Fortunately, they also make the DB25 line, which is what I have right here. DB25 Power Reserve. Debatoon makes its own cases, dials, and movements, so they're doing their own rose lathe guilloche to create this dial. We have blue on silver printing to give it a bit of warmth. We have fired blue titanium hands. We have a power reserve indicator. The watch has a power reserve of 6 days, and you can see as I wind it, the power reserve changes from red to silver. Beautiful conventional case. This is the thing about the DB25. It's not as extravagant as the Dreamwatches or the DB28s. The dial is closed and solid. The case has conventional lugs. It is thin, and as you can see, it is precious metal, but it is also very practical, as it is an automatic winder, and being automatic winding, this lovely white gold watch has a number of refinements, from the 6-day power reserve to the twin self-adjusting barrels to a fully shock-protected winding system to a platinum mass for maximum efficiency to 1, 2, 3 shock protection springs for the balance, a proprietary balance that is literally a titanium yoke with platinum masses outboard, and a 2-element hand-formed hairspring, 2 elements clamped together to breathe concentrically like an overcoil, but also give you the shock resistance and the flat profile of a flat hairspring. And again, 6 days of power reserve here. Wear the watch on the wrist. It is broad, it is flat, it is elegant, and it is not too extravagant. A handsome and understated piece from a company that makes about 200 to 220 watches a year, and you can see how easily it'll fit underneath the cuff. This is a great option for the collector who is perhaps comfortable with a Journe or a Moser type independent, but hasn't yet branched out into a company that's making 100, 200 watches with the avant-garde styles that Debatoon does. Now, all of that said, There is a Debatoon here that is more spectacular than what you just saw, getting a little bit more extravagant in case construction. This is the DB27 Titan Hawk 1 as it was introduced in 2012, and I cannot overemphasize you won't see another one like this one because there is not another one like this one. This is all blackened. Zirconium case, 43 millimeters, floating lugs, spring-loaded. You can see it is super flat and flush on the wrist. This piece unique is automatic winding with a 6-day power reserve, and unlike the later DB27 Titan Hawk 2, it has the 6-day power reserve, not the later 60-hour power reserve, and it has the center date on the dial rather than the later center seconds. It has a lush and lovely salmon dial, which you can see features micro-light engraving at center, blue printing, and a toroidal raised hour and minutes track outboard. You can see the hand that marks the date as well as the hours and the minutes. They have been fired blue, and the watch is simply gorgeous. It disappears in profile, being quite thin, and you can see there's a little window into the automatic movement. This uses a rotor just like the one you saw before, but it has a different balance, even more advanced, consisting of a silicon disc with a white gold rim to put as much of the mass outboard as possible and limit the effect of temperature on the timing and precision of the watch. This watch will fit a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference, and as you can see on my wrist, it's both flat and wonderfully conforming with those spring-loaded lugs. Again, piece unique, zirconium, scratch resistant, 43 millimeters, 6-day power reserve, automatic winding with a date. This is the DB27 Titan Hawk version 1. This is the big boy on today's show. It is not the final watch, and you'll see why that is in just a moment. But this, launched in 2016, is the Lange Sohne Datograph Perpetual Tourbillon. They don't get much more extravagant than this. Guys, this watch, a limited edition of 100 pieces, 41.5 millimeters in platinum, has a black dial that is in fact made of galvanized black sterling silver. You can see all the hands, the indices, the frame for the date are white gold. The moon phase disc is white gold. The watch is a flyback chronograph. It is an instantaneous jump perpetual calendar. It has a moon phase that does not need to be touched for 122 years. It has a power reserve indicator up at approximately 10 o'clock for the 50-hour power reserve. It is a manual wind with exceptional winding click feel, and as you can see, we will make sure we're not in the date change danger zone there. There is a pusher adjuster that does nothing until you pull the crown, and then it allows you to jump every indication of the perpetual calendar in sync. Notice how as I jump the date, I also jump the day. As I jump the day, I also jump the moon phase. This is a system that allows you to quickly catch up without desyncing your perpetual calendar. If it stops and you come back 4 days later, you simply wind the watch up, click 4 times, and then set the time. It's that simple. Everything moves in sync. This is your catch-up trigger if the perpetual calendar falls behind. But wait, there's more. Caliber L9522, which features a lush and lovely lateral clutch and column wheel, also includes a tourbillon regulator. And take note, it is a free-sprung hacking tourbillon regulator. It has an overcoil hairspring, and it has a diamond capstone sitting inside a screw-fixed jeweled chaton. We have interior angles within a black polished and skeletonized bridge for the tourbillon. The entire tourbillon cage is vintage style, harking back to 1920s tourbillon tech in Germany. You can see it has been black polished. You can see that all of the components of the chronograph, though made of steel, have been fully finished, satinated on their tops and beveled on their edges. You can see just inside the clutch, we have multiple sharp interior angles where bevels meet, but we also have sharp exterior points where bevels converge. And of course, the primary bridges and plates are made of golden-hued German silver, and we have a beautifully hand-engraved base underneath the cock for the tourbillon. And again, that diamond on top of the cage, that is not a synthetic diamond. The rubies here are synthetic. The diamond is real. And you could see the beauty of this movement from any angle, the depth it has, the beautiful ridges of the stripes, the breadth. of the beveled edges. We have both black polished and fired blue screws. This watch gives you both. It also has a remarkably deluxe clasp. As you can see here, we have a full folding clasp, a feature not included on a standard Datograph, but this watch is no standard Datograph. Power reserve, flyback chronograph, instantaneous jump perpetual calendar, and hacking tourbillon, all of that in a limited series of 100 watches. Oh, one more cool feature. As if this watch needed any more, it is actually quite well loomed for a dress watch. And it has a tachymeter scale, which is downright sporty. Let me throw this on the wrist real quick, because I don't know I gave you the benefit of a view on the wrist. This wears well on a small wrist. It's 41.5, guys, not 42, not 43, not 44. It's also nicely domed in profile, so it'll fit underneath the jacket cuff. I would have no problem wearing this at all. You can see in relation to my arm, it's really not that big. I often get close to the camera and make a watch look bigger than it is. This watch is not huge, anything but it is massive. Okay. Now, I qualified that last watch. I usually show the ultimate watch last on this program. The watch I'm about to show you has already been sold, so you can't buy it yet. But 10 were made, and we may have more in the near future. So if you are interested in the Debatoon Dreamwatch 5 Tourbillon Season 1, still reach out to me at tmosso@thewatchbox.com, because as I mentioned, there may be more in the near future. This one, however, has already found a new home, but I'm not going to deprive you of the chance to see the watch while I have it. So let's go over what makes this watch special. Now, the timepiece is made of grade 5 titanium, which in this instance has been entirely fired by flame to turn it blue, using a process that Debatoon has patented. The remainder of the watch is made of sapphire, and as you can see, it is unusual in its shape. This is the Dreamwatch 5, which is somewhere between a chevron, a tortoise shell, a seashell, and a tonneau. One might even say it looks a little bit like a spaceship. This timepiece is all of those, a deltoid profile that is organic, anything but a machine aesthetic. And you can see how everything is fared in perfectly and flush. We have a digital jump hour system. Although you can't see it easily, we have a spherical moon phase that has an adjustment interval of every 1,112 years. It is half blued steel, 1/2 white palladium. Now you can see, as I adjust the watch, there is a jump hour effect. It is spectacular. Now the watch also includes a scrolling minute display. And you can see that it is absolutely otherworldly, but it gets more so on the reverse side, where it is also a tourbillon, and no mean tourbillon. Let me tell you what you get with this tourbillon. First, a 30-second circuit. It moves at twice the speed of a standard 60-second tourbillon, so it makes one circuit every 30 seconds. Second, it beats away at an El Primero-like 36,000 vibrations per hour. It is made of a combination of titanium and white gold and silicon, and it has a mass of only 0.18 grams. And because it is a Debatoon tourbillon watch, it is accurate to within 1 second per day. It also features manual wind, twin self-adjusting barrels. They cannot be overwound. This 10-piece limited edition has a 4-day power reserve in spite of the high-beat 30-second tourbillon, the moon phase complication, and the jumping hour display. It is all of these things at once. And I should mention, as I said earlier, Debatoon makes its own cases, dials, and movements. It wears organic. It's approximately 46 millimeters across the wrist, so it's actually narrow across the wrist, but it's long down the wrist. But that doesn't matter, because your arm is long, the case is long, it's a perfect match. The watch, which wears a little bit like a gauntlet or perhaps a Star Trek phaser or wrist communicator, this is absolutely that avant-garde Debatoon for the guy who already has a comfort level with super high-end boutique brands. And I'm talking about Urwerk, I'm talking about MB&F, I'm talking about Grubel Forsey, those kind of brands. This is generally of that ilk, albeit with a higher level of engineering than you're likely to find in those, as Denis Flageolet of Debatoon is a scientist first, a physicist, and a watchmaker second, and the watch he hath wrought is an absolute eye-popper. This is the Dreamwatch 5 Tourbillon Season 1. This example is sold. There will be more. Not many, because they only made 10, but there will be at least one more. So let me know. Reach out to me, tmosso at thewatchbox.com, if you are interested in owning this or any watch you saw on today's show.